78 years ago, on the day I was born, March 6, 1977, mankind first spotted the asteroid. Asteroid 3518 Grover 1977 QC4, or simply Grover, was and is a hunk of rock measuring 1,001 miles long and 705 miles across. The asteroid that killed the dinosaurs? A pebble. Grover had his own moons. To this day, statisticians still maintain that an asteroid of such magnitude could only strike the Earth, statistically speaking, way back during the planet's formation, around 4 billion years ago. And some people still believe them. What I believe is that before this day is over, there's a 100% chance of Grover's front end slamming into Lebanon, Kansas, and there's nothing any statistician can do about it. Grover will hit the Earth and kill billions of people, along with God knows how many trillions of other creatures, no matter what. That's the way the world will end. It's inevitable. Oh, if you're watching from the independent nation island of Hawaii, where many friends of mine have gathered with King Bob, the fireball will appear almost 4 times as large as the sun. The resulting plume of smoke and dust will reach past the moon and rain down 45 minutes later on pretty much everything, just as the burning starts. Straw huts, Hawaiian newspapers, plywood, deciduous trees, and grass will all ignite along with people's clothes. The people watching from Hawaii will suffer third-degree burns just from the flash, but at least they won't live long enough to complain. Meanwhile, way on the other side of the world, people who won't witness the fireball firsthand will still feel the quake. Registering 14.2 on the Richter scale, it will be no less than the most powerful earthquake in history. And, if by some miracle that earthquake leaves anything standing, in just 17 hours the air blast will hit. It'll knock over the remains of any buildings and bridges, shatter windows, and blow down every last tree in the plush tropical paradise of America's enemy, the great Australian Empire. Within days, not a single-celled organism will remain living on the planet. Not in the deepest parts of the seas, not on the melted continent of Antarctica, nowhere. Grover's impact will represent the equivalent of 600 million megatons of TNT exploding smack dab in the center of the continental United States. That's Lebanon, Kansas, by the way. Lebanon, Kansas just so happens to be the dead center of America. I guess soon it'll be known for 2 things. These are the thoughts that flicker through my head as I set course for Lebanon, Kansas, and the great asteroid, Grover. This is pointless, says the human-sounding voice reverberating out from the black mesh computer speakers all around my stolen spaceship. Why do you want to die with them? You are not a salmon. You do not need to swim upstream just to die in your place of birth. That voice, I think, they programmed it not to sound too robotic, I guess. Not to sound too inhuman. Not too scary. I look down at my own robotic arm and can't help but think, in the back of my mind, that I'm at least partially responsible. Okay, mostly responsible. But I'm going to fix that. I've still got a few hours left to live. Plus, I'm much smarter than a salmon. Although salmon do get to spawn first before they die. In any case, I ignore the voice's warning, and I think back to my very first birthday. Perhaps I can't actually remember back that far, but I like to think that some part of me still can. Some part of my brain that I can't access except through imagination. After all, what are we if not a collection of our memories? I mean, losing even a single one seems like dying a little. When I was born, neither me nor my parents nor most people on Earth knew what was coming. Grover was still just a glimmer of light in Dr. Maximus Grover's telescopic lens as he watched from his observatory in the Canary Islands. It would take the good doctor another 3 years, recording and measuring and plotting and whatever, before he felt confident enough to report his findings to NASA. Sure, that's far less than the 30 years of research that went into Darwin's On the Origin of Species. But hell, for all some people think now, Darwin was wrong and Dr. Grover was right. People nowadays seem to believe in 2 things, creationism and destructionism. Of course, like Darwin, Dr. Grover sparked global controversy. Scientists from every walk of life took a swing at Dr. Grover's claims. Experts from all 7 of the 7 nations, plus America, they all came out against him, against his methods, his observations, his calculations, and they all failed. 8 years after Dr. Grover had first spotted, as he called it, a boulder with my name on it, he published his most famous work, On the End of Species, a very well-researched report stating that an asteroid would destroy the planet on the date 78 years from the day I was born. People called it the Doomsday Paper. Now, the day the Doomsday Paper came out in the press, that day I remember vividly. I was 8 years old, playing with my friend Rainer Keenan and his older but smaller brother Osmond, and our friend, who was a girl, Callie. All of us in the neighbor's backyard. A bird's nest had fallen out of a tree, and there, in the pile of twigs and leaves broken on the ground, lay 2 baby birds. They looked raw, naked. They didn't have any feathers. They couldn't fly or stand or crawl away. They could hardly chirp. While their mother flew overhead, Callie and Rainer and I tried our hardest to coax little Osmond into stepping on her children. I can still hear those bald little creatures chirping as best they could for their mother, for anyone to make them feel safe and warm again. They weren't afraid of us, I don't think. I don't think they had the slightest clue what was about to happen. And that poor little boy we made do it, poor little Osmond Keenan, who'd grow up to lead the greatest nation on earth. I remember how he stood, shifting from foot to foot, like he had to pee and didn't want to go in his pants. I remember how the 3 of us stood around him, too, chanting. Osmond knew that squashing those baby birds was wrong. He knew, but the pressure was just too great. And so, down came Osmond's shoe, and the chirping stopped. Oh, how that boy's little face shone with relief then. Relief because he'd done it. He'd done what his friends had wanted him to do. But of course, that's when what we had done sunk in. When the thought became, oh no, how do we avoid complicity in this horrible crime? How do we shift the blame? What's our way out? 1 second, we're chanting, stop them, stop them, stop them. And the next, murderer, murderer, murderer. What lesson did Osmond take from that experience? Hard to say. But with the aid of hindsight, I'd have to guess that for Osmond, it blurred the lines between champion of the people and scapegoat, taught him the fickleness of crowds, and made trivial the power to decide the fates of lesser beings. It gave him all the traits he'd need to become a great leader. I'll always remember the day we killed those baby birds as the day I first learned about death. But looking back now, after 78 years, the day the Doomsday paper came out certainly wasn't the day I first felt like the world was ending. That day wouldn't come until the day Callie left me. That's the day I packed up my belongings, said goodbye to Mom and Dad, and caught the next flight, connecting flight, chartered jet, ferry, all-terrain vehicle, and snowmobile to Antarctica. Off to Antarctica. OTA, or as our high school guidance counselors pronounced it, OTA. Whenever they'd advise someone like me, an all-state, all-American athlete student, of his or her most promising career option after high school, they'd say oughta, as in, you oughta head for Antarctica. So after Callie left me, I followed their advice. I set off to Antarctica. Like so many other kids did during the cold rush, I set off to make my fortune.